Yeah, the deeper down this little road I'm going, the more interesting challenges I'm coming up with to make up for the fact that this is a bad idea. I made up my mind I'm going to build another robot, kind of like Betsy here. This is her provisional name. And I got all these making plenty of servos, salvage Lego motors, some rack and pinion salvage parts, sort of the technical Lego stuff with all the gears and whatnot. I have Makey-Makeys and Arduino Unos and the red board. I think I've got a Mega sitting around in there. A couple of Beagle Bones, some other stuff I fished out of the trash at work. You wouldn't believe the amount of cool stuff I find in the trash. Other things fished out of the trash. Lots of Lego servos, essentially, or what amounts to their ribbon cable receptacle being shorn off cleanly. So these are from a project that I was not involved with, but these were destined for the landfill, simply because they look like they might be a nightmare to fix. Well, I assure you, just a simple DC motor. So no problem. Wander back over to plenty of aluminum stock to construct a chassis and a frame to hold not one, not two, but minimally 3 servos, 1 Arduino, perhaps 2 Arduinos, what for controlling multiple servos. Although I believe the servo library supports up to 12 servos on a Uno and something like double that on a Mega board. So we got options. But we're not putting old Betsy out of business yet. In fact, she's got a lot of work to do. I still have 10 or 15 36-inch and 48-inch canvas that need to be worked on. While Betsy's doing that job, we'll be doing this job by hand. No robots to help us build the next version of that. So let's take a look at what's on the drawing board and see if we can't sketch out an idea or two. And speaking of spare parts, I almost forgot the best part. I want it to be powered by this. Take a looky-loo and see what this actually is. I haven't opened any of these. I fished them out of the trash, among other things. Oh boy, this is... So somebody bought a part. Looks like probably, what am I looking at here? 14 pin. Now, what do you think 14 pins is for? That sounds like 7 channels. Am I looking at this right? Is that 14? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Or does it? This doesn't. Why don't magnifying glasses work on camera? Answer me that. 1, 2, 3, 4. They are 14 pin. Weird. Some proprietary blend of herbs and spice. But this stuff, it's like loose snakes. And this wire gets all over the... This is meant to be... What's the phrase? Here's the reason behind this wire. This is not being in a ribbon cable. Is this needs to be in some kind of a lightweight... No, that doesn't make sense. All I can guess is that this goes into an enclosure, and the tie-down straps. That's all that's keeping it together. I mean, you're gonna probably need a tie-down strap every 6 or so to be professional about it. Or you run it. There's no. Oh, this is what it. This goes into a conduit, and so to keep this is being run through conduit, and that's why it's loose. It doesn't need to be. If you're gentle with it, it does not need to be overly restrained. It's very flexible as well, without any kind of. Whoa! Oh yeah. Well, what with the quarantine and all, there's a lot more grapefruit Bellini being consumed in the house. Also, don't throw away the little strap that it comes with. So, doing this robot build out, I've decided that a rack and pinion steering situation is both doable. Shouldn't take more than, I reckon, a day to figure it out with the parts that I have. So that would be 1 servo controlling the rack and pinion. Next up, by the way, we're doing kind of this T-shaped chassis, rigid. And then off of that, there'll be spars and whatnot to standoffs to mount things like the Arduino or 2 Arduinos. Might have to stack a couple of them. I'm not worried about battery weight or power. I'm going to tether that in. Power from above. And a friend of mine, David Micah, the luthier, I tend to get boxes of just detritus from him every couple years, and this is a very nice carbon fiber rod that he would normally use to reinforce the neck of a guitar body. That doesn't make any sense. To reinforce the neck of a guitar. Or he also uses them to brace inside of acoustic guitar. Long story short being, carbon fiber, very cool. Skookum AF. And you gotta remember, this is how I'm powering robots from above, is with a mast. And it's just like your good old bumper cars at the carnival have a mast that is essentially holding a brush against the mesh ceiling. Bit of a diversion there. Anyways, one servo for the rack and pinion, another servo for the stylus. The stylus unit, well, is this a good shot of that? Yeah. The stylus unit being this entire clump of material here, this entire gantry, and all of the accoutrement in order to adjust the stylus. These are tensioning screws through a piece of poplar, which ought to be painted white at this point. The stylus unit also includes some kind of a guide, and I've taken the fast and cheap approach of a copper winding, and it's worked remarkably well, because what happens is if you're a tail dragger, obviously what happens, that's up and down motion, not doing rotary tool changes or anything like that. Nothing fancy on this build because this is a radically new design for me, and I'm not going from a kit, we're just eyeballing it. Side view, something like this. 2 front wheels, 1 rear drive wheel, Arduino stack here if needs be. That's the stylus unit, servo number 2, servo number 1, rack and pinion power steering. Buzz along now, buzz along. So this by no means is how this project will turn out. I'm just sharing it. It's a pencil sketch at this point. On the quest to get stuff done, I'm usually a goof up when it comes to this kind of, planning. I more or less just fire up the saw and start cutting. Bingo. Well, let's see how we did there. What is this? Okay. Ooh, yeah, that is pretty tight. Yeah, this is off by just 1/4 of a millimeter. Back to the drill press. Well, that's something. I really want to drill these holes out bigger on the wheels and take a chance. See if we can't just use, what do you call this thing? Spinning thing. I'd like to use this Lego spinning thing because it's plastic on plastic, so you're self-lubricated in that regard. And the length of that, the length of this axle is about the width of the hub. So, yeah, probably getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And we already know that the OD is correct, because that guy fits in there no problem. So, the question is if we run that right straight through that hole, I'm going to be off center a little bit. A little bit might be okay, but too much will be unacceptable. Only one way to find out. Well, I had me a second think before I jumped to some conclusions about best approach to fix the wheel to the steering mechanism, and found some screws that are just about the right diameter for that hole. So now the question is, we get a screw to seat correctly into that hole, probably with glue, but I will need something longer than that. Well, I realized after looking at this a lot closer, there's a flat spot in there for a special kind of axle, of which I do not have. So we're going to very carefully take a smaller diameter bit and manually pull it to try to round out the flat spot. Only problem is, they come off. So these little half sleeves have a very open channel on the inside. These double sleeves with the shoulder going around the middle has a more narrow diameter just in the middle. So I'm going to run 2 of these through the bandsaw so that I can use this one instead of this blue one. I think this will work better. We're going to find out. Yeah, I normally wouldn't recommend doing this ever, but we kind of need this part. That is one raspy ass blade. Now I believe this can be really tight on there. In fact, we might even super glue that because it can fit right into that spinny thing. That's not too bad. Yeah, it's a little wobbly, I gotta say. It's springy. It's got built-in springiness. Those aren't gonna last too long. If this gets too flexy, then the point of failure is probably going to be this T channel. Working on the steering system here. Building out this prototype, early on already I'm seeing that we got some problems, structural problems. There's a lot of flex in these rods, obviously, being plastic and all. And there's quite a bit of flex in the, I guess, the wheel knuckle, for lack of a better term. And the flex does appear to be happening at the axle. So as a prototype, it's probably short-lived for this world. So I need a way to mount the servo. For now, just got a little tiny block of ebony, 2 holes, punch through, line up with 2 holes on the frame, and we can tie those up like so. Nope, probably doing that backwards. Let's pop that out of there. We'll mount the servo first, and taking care not to overbore the hole with the diameter of the screw. We'll see. So I'm just going to do this by hand. Nice and tight. This is a dubious solution at best. If all doesn't go well with this, I'll remill this out of aluminum, which is what I should have done to begin with, but here we are. Now here's another gigantic shortcut and a shortcoming in the structural integrity of this over time. This engine, this servo, basically an engine with torque, is going to be twisting this wire up. Might need to do some welding with a Bic lighter on the spindle, that is, weld on a Lego gear onto the spindle. Now, like I said, I have been just eyeballing this whole thing, measurements and all. Very quick prototype, basically. I'm not going to get too hung up on fit and finish or quality or anything like that. I just want to see a working demo, and if this design is entertaining enough, then we'll get this entire mechanism machined out of something a wee tad stronger than the Lego plastique. The strut is not suspended by anything, so if we add some kind of additional triangular structure or something like that, then she has a fighting chance of lasting longer than a few hours. Something to consider as I get along with this build. Also, I had intended to use a smaller OD gear to drive the rack, but as it turns out, my eyeballing measurements have required a larger gear, so this is what we're going to run with. Single point of failure. We call it the unitary engine mount system. Yeah, that's rather wiggly, but I don't think it matters at the moment. This isn't going to be too torquey of a motor as it is. We don't need to go more than a centimeter in either direction, and whatever the torque ounces might be, this motor mount is torquing that away. So we got the gear pushing down pretty hard on the rack. Gonna need to put some kind of tension modifier on there, maybe. Probably another wire, or something slightly more clever. So let's see if this works. There happens to be a handy screw on the back plate of the servo, and we're gonna wrap a wire loop around that and tie it down to this stud down here and try to hand crank, or basically I think maybe one twist ought to pull this engine up. Just wire tie downs, all aviation style. Alright, the servo is mounted onto the frame fairly well for now. Wiring harness. Looks like somebody went to a lot of trouble to heat shrink the ends of the servo wiring. Wrap it about 20 times with electrical tape and into what looks like 24 gauge wire, which is a tad too thin for my taste. So I'm actually going to stop what I'm doing and solder on some paper clips onto the ends of these, heat shrink those. It just makes them a lot nicer going into any kind of connection socket on the Arduino. Slathered it up there with solder using paste flux just to get her to go a little quicker. Let's see, where was I? Over this yonder way. And oh, shimey, I did not cut enough. Yeah, let's try to do 2 things at once. We're just gonna freehand this without using helping hands. Or nice and solid solder. We have contact. This ain't working. Being somewhat ambidextrous has its merits. Apparently this is not one of them. Alright. Come on. Big bead of solder on there. Well, being from the Pacific Northwest, I like my salmon smoky and my solder smokier. It's a regional thing. Keep this precious paperclip stash in with the heat shrink. So we has servo, we have wiring harness, we has, as my father would say, no, we has these things. So now, no need to beat around the bush. we has Arduino. It's already wire mounted to a piece of foam core. That's actually pretty handy. Oh yes, The Nymphs and the Command Line by Francois Le Bouton. No. By Frances R. Barton. Nope. Will it start? Indeed so. Uh-oh. USB whatever. What is that? A, B. That's mini, as I recall. USB mini to USB A. Gonna have to go back to the mothership to get to the USB mother load. Proves the point to never throw away old computer-related cables. You never know when you're going to need it. Or, for that matter, when it's going to come back in vogue again. I find myself looking at busted tape players and old iPods. No idea what's running on this, so we're going to obviously flash the board. Uploaded something that didn't work. Well, I can't be sure what's what anymore, so former self wrapped 23 turns of black electrical tape, and current self is cursing. Oh, gin crickets. I think this might be the one. Had my wires all crisscrossed. Yeah, if you're testing out a servo for the first time on a rig, you definitely want to have your hand on the switch, so to speak. It's funny what you remember after not doing a thing for a couple of years. I seem to remember it taking forever to upload from the Arduino IDE onto a board. On Mac, it's fast. On Linux, it's fast. So I might switch over to one of those two. So many things to do. Ah, yes. Well, she looks like a right jalopy. So coming up with just a simple diagnostic app in the Arduino, but their editor just is a thing to behold. So I've been working in Sublime Text just for my own sanity. Since I'm stuck on a Windows box here doing this. It's slow too, slow to upload. Anyways, it's working. She's alive. I think I almost got the loop just about right. So that pinion is using up the entire length of the rack. So that's a little bit on the edge of there. I mean, there ain't no margin for error there. Spurious GitHub folder. Everything I'm doing is just, it's 10 years old as far as the technology goes, the servo stuff. So yeah, you can see the pinion gear is working itself right off the rack over the court, and now it's gonna start to tear the thing apart. I realize the errors in my ways with this entire detour down this particular route of steering modality. You know, this has got to come off. It's just gonna tear itself apart. I mean, where to begin? Just for giggles, the choice was made to put this kind of steering mechanism on it over the, usual R2-D2 kind of thing where the driving wheels are also the steering wheels and the steering is done via the driving. Not here, and this is also going to increase my turn radius by a factor of whatever. Won't be able to turn on my own radius with this kind of steering mechanism. So this is, in hindsight, it's a complete mistake. However, there is already challenges to be had, and one of them is the fact that this is a continuous servo, not a positional servo. So therefore, finding top dead center with this is kind of up to the code. You've got to code it to find top dead center. Then came across these nice little guys from Vetco, the local candy store for nerds. And you know what these are. IR sensor, IR receiver. So yada yada yada, stick them over here. This is the idea anyways. We'll just knock this thing apart, and build a guy right here that's kind of in a blackened tube with a narrow opening. I don't know about you, but this whole quarantine situation, it's got me thinking about things like 60 cycle hum fever. I feel like I got 60 cycle hum fever. I can just, as soon as I walk outside, it goes away. So anyways, yeah, the deeper down this little road I'm going, the more interesting challenges I'm coming up with to make up for the fact that this is a bad idea. Alignment issues. So if I build this, I'll have a servo that can self-align to an arbitrary center point, or to a top dead center, if you will, because this is a continuous servo and not a positional servo. Coming at you from little town of Twin Peaks, with just a short drive from Saskatchewan, which is a butcherization of Seattle, which is a bastardization of Chief Seattle's name, which was apparently Chief Seattle, although I have butchered the pronunciation. Now we'll just see how screwed up this thing is. Just slowly working itself right off the rack. It's annoying, but I think it's an interesting problem to try to solve. Before we get carried away, we're going to breadboard this up, and I'm just trying to find a spare breadboard sitting around the shop. It's like trying to pan for gold or something. Yeah, this looks fairly useless. Bread warming 101. Oh, this isn't even a good one. This one's had the bottom torn off. You know how that is. These things are so highly capacitant, they're so noisy. If you stick a op amp on a tiny breadboard, you're just asking for transients to show up in your signal. Not that I have anything against tramps or transients or hobos or people who ride the train for free. Gonna work off this schematic. What the frick? Ah, God. What is... Oh, maybe. Gosh, what is that? Purple, yellow, yellow? That doesn't make any sense. No, white, yellow, purple, white, yellow, purple, gray. I can't read it. I'm gonna have to get out me handy chart. What are they saying? I like to use 100 ohm, 100 for a choke on a LED. You can use almost, well, you can't use anything but 470K. Well, maybe that is right for white or whatever. What is it? Gray, purple, something. Gray, purple, something. That seems like a lot. Let's just use hundreds. It was just one of those days in the shop. I decided to put all these on a board. I mean, it kind of keeps them out of the way. And in another way, it keeps them in the way. So these 470Ks can go back into the bin of resistance. No, man, brown, black, red is like 10. It's like 1K or 10K or 100K. It's like 100. How many you got? I got 100. Then you know you're dealing with straight talk. If they pull up with dualies and a toe tongue in the back, and they say 100 or they say boss, then you're dealing with straight talk. When you go to the cellular phone store and say this isn't working, and they say, oh well, yeah, that's not straight talk. That's shysters. They call it Vetco, but I call it Indetco. Every time I go in there, I gotta refi my house again. That's where I got this bad boy. An old oscilloscope, 200 megahertz. Japanese made skookum, as my father used to say. Being we grew up in the Pac Northwest, exposed to a lot of Chinook jargon. Yeah, we were exposed to Chinook jargon. It was kind of part of the ruffian culture. In the course of jibber-jabbering, while doing electronics, put my detector where my emitter ought to be, so I switcheroo, because one's got a pull-down resistor, because I'm going to do a little experiment, and the other doesn't. Otherwise, how else are you going to get it to the board? Man, what's going on there? It's just all bass-ackwards as far as polarity goes. We all know, as soon as you snip off your LED, which side's the cathode. Can you even tell by looking at the... Can you look at the, does it help? See that? Why do I even bother? Is the big one? The big one's gotta be the anode. Got it. What, for attracting all the angry all those little corpuscles of electrical. I guess the smart thing to do would be to swap out one of these with the just LED, see which side's hot. I don't friggin' know. It's too late, there's no turning back. It shouldn't take more than a couple hours, right? Any little tangential idea, just a couple hours, right? That's all it takes. So, we'll rework this thing. I need those right. There you go. It's up on the tool shelf where they belong. Let's give ourselves a fighting chance if we're gonna dumpster diving here for chassis parts. Let's see if this lines up. Yeah, diesel fitter. It's only taken an hour, I promise. Which begs the question, what color tape? Black, of course, always black. And optionally white if you need to make flags or put, mark your mixing board, that kind of thing. You need some good contrast. Always good to have both colors, black and white, at the ready. Trying to remember what possessed me to go to such detail to mount this breadboard on here. Atsui desu. Atsui desu ne. Muy atsui desu ne. No, let's see, what is it? Totemo atsui desu ne. Hi, atsui desu. Alright, enough silliness. This is the problem. You go through the airport with this in your pelly case and they start asking questions. It doesn't matter what you look like, they want to swab your bag, as they say. Can I swab your bag? It's like, well, that wasn't in the plans today. I don't know, let me ask my wife. Well, I think we deserve to we need to do this or that. What is that one odd symbol, man? It doesn't take but a pinch between cheek and gum. That's ridiculous. but it'll work. She'll work. Yeah, diesel fitter. I mean, the hot glue is getting fucking everywhere. Just infuriating. At the moment, the shop just bench is not large enough. I got too much things going on right here. Alright, there's no need to get crazy with this. We don't need to union wind it. And there we go, that's our test IR circuit. We'll fire it up now and take a look at pin 2, see what's coming in. What's going on here? I just thought I saw a glow of red. Of course I didn't, it's not plugged in. This is what happens, man. You start seeing ghosts in the shop. It's a 60 cycle hum fever, I'm telling you. It's not make-believe. The running light on the board, the green one, man, I think that's on 13 or something like that, if memory serves. I wonder if there's a way to just turn it off. I mean, I could, chompy. Yeah, it's a big problem when you expect to see a light come on and you realize after much cursing and cussing, there's no ground connection to the board. And the servo is also chattering every now and then. Something's making it chatter. It's periodic stray current through the plumbing. Well, this is one crappy thing about old breadboards is you got a wiggly wire in one of these terminals and it kind of negates the whole point. It's just lovely. Just what I wanted to deal with. I mean, you can't even hot shmoo this up and to hold it in there. There's no guarantee there's a contact. That's discouraging. Well, we're going to press on anyways. Normally this 22 gauge wire is pretty reliable for breadboarding. You can take this where you like, but gauge alone doesn't solve all problems. There's something to be said for style and technique. And just a note to future self, these are just like, even though they say NPN transistor on them, they look a lot like an LED to me when you look inside of them. The anode is the larger plate and the cathode's the smaller plate. And of course the wire length gives it away. On these little guys that come in a little tiny 2-ounce bag, they clip them at such a shallow angle. This is like, what the Catholic priests, what were the Catholic priests saying on, I don't know. Who's the one you get circumcised? Yeah, it's like priest jokes in the morning. I don't know, over in the terminal, I'm just seeing like 250, I'm seeing, what am I doing? I'm going to the analog in. Analog in, it's next to the Holiday Inn, it's next to the Denny's, it's next to the Sherry's off exit, what is that exit? Well, there's one down in Renton, but boy, I haven't been into a Sherry's in a long time, probably never will ever again. Kind of a good truck stop situation. It's a lot of Buicks and fifth wheel types. That's nothing wrong with that. What do we got here? They put the cap over it. Well, these frustrating little things, they're all blackened. You can't look inside, not very easily anyways. So, pro tip is to pull it out and see if your pull down resistor is working. With one eyeball on the console, the other guy, I'm just shorting out the circuit with a resistor. I'm looking at a 1. I pull this out to switch, so now I got a 0 because we are pulling to ground. And that's what a pull down resistor does, is it pulls to whatever your reference ground is. The pin out reading is correct. That's making me somewhat happy. There she is, numbers going by. And just for giggles, I swap out the infrared stuff and just go with straight visible light sensor. So I got a 1, I got a 0, I got a 1, I got a 0. Well, that kind of works too. I gotta say the light resistor with the infrared emitter working pretty good. Getting 1s and 0s right when I expect them. Whereas the phototransistor, I can't seem to get nothing to work. Are they cooked? No. Is that what's going on? Well, I found my bug. I had this guy. That doesn't make any sense. Good lord. It's like the voltage is running backwards through the junction. That doesn't make any sense. I got a 1, I got a 0, I got a 1. Bingo, bango, bongo. Bob's your uncle. Again, this stuff only takes an hour, right? Just an hour out of your way just to kind of work out all the bugs. Time well spent, right? Very counterintuitive, though, I gotta say. Well, believe it or not, we're gonna put these on the drill press and just widen the OD of that hole by ever so slightly. So that right there, that's the infrared emitter. I gotta remember the long side of this thing is actually the negative. Just counterintuitive. It's usually on these little LED packages, long leg is positive. This is somewhat satisfying since we got these things drilled out special, and now we can pop this guy on there, yep, and do like that. Gotta get out your Chilton manual for reassembling one of these things. It's like taking apart a Mini Cooper. It's good luck. This is basically our arbitrary center signal. So when we are like aligned, we ought to be at dead center. with the steering mechanism. That's the idea. I won't lie to you, I think this is by far maybe the biggest mistake, the worst design I've ever come up with for a robot. Rack and pinion steering is a ridiculous idea. That said, we're moving forward at 100% steam. We're not going to hit our stop loss. We're just going to plunge forth. I mean, I'm lucky to get this far with it because these flippin' infrared diodes, bags and bags of them that I got from Indetco, and dogs running around, and like everybody that works behind the counter, it's all these sorry sad sacks that probably never seen a woman naked before. But let me tell you, they know their op-amp. They're probably not even open right now with this goddamn masks on situation. Yeah, I wear my mask. I go over to the home desperation facility, and there's a guy wearing his mask up on his forehead, you know, like a real hero. That's smart. You got your hat on backwards and your mask up on your fucking forehead.